There we go. Happy Sunday, everybody. Welcome to Innerspace Journeys. This is our weekly Sunday gathering. I find myself usually it's about midweek that I find myself inspired and I receive whatever message or insight wants to be the focus for the week. Sometimes it comes earlier, sometimes I'm just full of ideas. And this week, really, surrender and the idea of surrender was ironically, I think, in sort of, the sense of humor of spirit. I didn't really get the inspiration until like Friday night or yesterday morning. I can't even remember honestly when it came through, but it was kind of late to the party. Um, and so that's what we're going to talk about today is surrendering to surrender. These gatherings really, this is about exploration. This is about coming together in community and sharing ideas, sharing thoughts, experiences, and really just allowing ourselves to be present, connect with one another, connect with ourselves, connect with spirit, and just receive the energy that's here for us today. I think that one of the beautiful things that we can acknowledge is that if we have the wherewithal and the resources to afford a device and an internet connection and a couple of hours on a Sunday just to sit and be, then I think that's a pretty good life. Now, obviously, we all have our issues, we all have our problems, but to me, I can say, if I am in a place where I can afford to be present with you all for a couple of hours and it not create havoc or undue stress in my life, then my life is pretty good. So I just really love to acknowledge what we have before us as a group of seekers coming together to support one another. So sometimes it might be just wanting to be present and listen. Sometimes it might be you wanting to engage and offer and dialogue and question and all of that. And all of that is welcome here. Even if you just want to be silent and quiet and not show your face and not say a word, not join the chat, that's perfectly okay. All levels of participation are welcome here. And this certainly isn't about you forcing yourself to be uncomfortable. Having said that, dipping a toe outside of the comfort zone every once in a while, it's really good for you. It's really good for the ego. Say whatever makes the ego uncomfortable or anxious is really, really good for the soul and also really good for the ego. To be perfectly honest, I think it's good for the ego to be uncomfortable every once in a while. But really, this is simply about being with one another. And as always, these gatherings are free of charge. There's um, no fee or no cost for you to be present here. Having said all of that, donations are always welcome if you find yourself inspired or comforted or guided by this work. I've shared my Stripe link and my PayPal link. So you're more than welcome to offer donation, but again, you don't have to, and I certainly don't expect it. So this idea of surrender and I think everyone is familiar with the ins and outs of Zoom, right, by this point. But obviously the chat is where we can share ideas, share thoughts, questions, support. Hi, Marcy, so lovely to see you. And then we also have the controls at the bottom where we can raise our hand if we have something that we'd like to offer or we have something that we would like to share. And then you can unmute yourself, and then we can have a dialogue, especially when we get into like the kind of question and answer or the discussion portion. But what I really like to do, and just to begin this space, when I'm talking about the idea of surrender, good morning, Lisa. What is it that comes up for you? And you can just drop a word or something in the chat. You can just unmute yourself and share a couple of thoughts or a couple of words. But when we're talking about surrender, and when you hear the word surrender, because it's something that we talk a lot about. I said this in my newsletter this morning. I think probably next to manifestation, surrender is probably one of those spiritual concepts that is talked about the most, to the degree that do we even really understand what it means anymore? Love that, Teresa. So Teresa's saying, stop grasping and clinging. That's what surrender brings up for her. Marcy says, vulnerability, to be me. Melissa says there are many more layers to surrender. And I'm not looking for anything specific here. There's no right or wrong. I'm just really wanting for you to share, like what letting go, Dan says. What does surrender bring up for you? It's an interesting concept, right? I think in the beginning, good, Lisa. The word surrender itself terrifies me. Letting go is another story. I appreciate that honesty. Surrender is not easy. Being valued by yourself, I love that, JGS. Allowing my innate wisdom to be my guide. All of these answers I would put in the correct column. Don't fight the current, go with it. Yeah, all of these ideas of surrender, letting go of seeking control, everything that you all are saying are exactly the words that come up for me when I think about surrender. I think surrender is letting go for me is about letting me being with the source within us. Yeah, it's when I think of surrender, what I think of is removing the barriers between me and life, right? When I'm talking about surrender, there's no buffer between me and spirit, between me and my experience. There's no padding around me. There's no numbing agent to make it a little bit easier. It is me with life, nose to nose, face to face, toe to toe, trusting the unknown. All of these are what surrender is. I think really, in the end, what I really think about surrender is it's not giving up, it's giving in. When I think of surrender, it's really giving in to this. What in here is guiding me, leading me, imploring me, asking me, requesting of me, maybe gently nudging or even pushing me to move in a specific direction, to go with a specific thought, let me get my notes up here, to be in a specific state. So I think the first thing that we acknowledge is, surrender, and the idea of surrender is really only difficult for the ego. Because the ego often thinks that surrender means I lost. Right? Because when I first really began to dive into this idea of surrender, this was years and years and years ago. For me, the implication that was is like, oh, you lost. Like the other side surrendered, right? They raised the white flag and said, I surrender, I give up, you win. So I think often for many of us, especially willful individuals like me, the idea of surrender has negative connotations because we think that we lost. We think that we weren't good enough. The other team was better. The other side was stronger. They fought harder. They had better technology. They had more advanced weapons. They had more resources. They had a bigger team. But surrender has nothing to do with loss, at least not in the way that the ego thinks, right? Because the ego is always keeping score. Oh, you have more than me. Oh, I beat you. You're different in this way than I am, right? So the ego is always looking for separation. The ego is always only ever trying to identify itself via the lens of separation. Like, how am I different or better than or worse than or whatever than you are, or what that is? So I think the first thing to acknowledge, oh, I got to turn off those stupid AI gesture things. I think the first thing to acknowledge is surrender has nothing to do with winning or losing. Surrender, from my perspective, is simply acknowledging, even if I don't believe it yet. Surrender is simply acknowledging that there's got to be another way, or there's another choice, or there's another option, or there's another answer, or there's something that I don't have access to that I can't see. Right? Surrender essentially says there's something beyond my comprehension. There's something that my limited human mind cannot perceive of. Especially because the human mind always wants it to be 2 and 2 equals 4, right? The human mind is always looking for the linear experience of time as I do this and then I do that, and it's always transactional. If I do this thing, then I'll get that thing. And I can admit that for me in the beginning, surrender, I thought it was just a transactional mechanism, right? Like, okay, spirit, I'll give up this or I'll give into that if you give me this. I thought it was a negotiation tactic. I mean, that's a part of it, and it can certainly lead you to what actual surrender is. And I've said probably no less than 100 times, probably closer to 1,000 times over the course of the past 12 years, I thought I knew what surrender was. And I think that's the beautiful thing, is that surrender is a living concept. Surrender isn't something that you do, and you don't think your way to it. There's not a manual of how to surrender. You just do it. You just allow it. You release the pressure. You release the tension. You release the resistance. Surrender is, I think, understanding first and foremost that the universe is a benevolent place. And for those of us with traumatic histories, for those of us with deep religious indoctrination, the idea of a loving God, a loving universe, a loving reality is quite foreign. But think about that. Like, why would we be given a dream or a desire or a passion only then to be plopped down in a body and to spend the rest of the experience not achieving it, not receiving it, not accomplishing it? And why would spirit, God, the universe, whatever you call that intelligence, if we really do believe that we are that, why would God ever deny itself anything? Except for perhaps outside of the experience of wanting to know what it was like to be denied something. But even that doesn't have to be a lifelong commitment. So I think when we believe that there is, or we're at least willing to entertain the idea that there's another way, I can be curious about something before I believe it. This is why I say every single day of my life, practically, the only two things that are required for a successful, because that's the only kind of spiritual journey there is. It's a successful one. There is no such thing as a failure or a lack of success. But the best way to ensure your success, only two things required: willingness and curiosity. That's it. I can be curious about it, entertaining an idea and seeing what else happens without believing it, without committing to it. I can say, all right, I'll just try this. And I shared this with you at the end of last year. One of the messages that I was getting over and over and over was, when you find yourself in a familiar place, when you find yourself in a set of circumstances that you're like, oh God, not this again, there's one thing that will ensure that you never have to engage with it at that level, at that way again. That is trying the thing that you've never tried before in that moment. What haven't you tried? And I would put money on the fact that 99% of humans, including me, because up until recently I was in that same boat, the one thing that most of us have never tried is doing nothing, is just trusting, is just surrendering and saying, okay, Spirit, I'm here. I'm not fighting. I'm not resisting. I'm not running. I'm not even trying to solve anything. I'm simply here. What would happen if we simply allowed ourselves to be present in the experience as it is? Because what I think surrender can really be, right? And Melissa touched on this, there are layers of surrender. I think the first step is you just surrender to the idea of surrender. You go, oh, well, that's an interesting concept, right? We see this in 12-step, right? You give your power to, you give your authority to the higher power, right? There's got to be another way. God knows. God knows better, spirit, whatever that consciousness or that being is for you. That's one of the steps of recovery, right? That's one of the things that we have to do to come back to ourselves is surrender. So surrender really is an invitation. Surrender is an invitation for miracles. Surrender is an invitation for grace. Surrender says, I don't know how to go beyond where I am now, but I trust that there is a way, and I trust that that way is available to me. And I allow myself simply to be present and receive it. I think surrender is the first gateway to healing. And ironically, I think surrender is the final gateway out of healing into transformation. And isn't that the irony of it? That as I stand before the gateway of my healing, surrender and saying, okay, I am willing to sit with this pain. I am no longer interested in denying it or excluding it or numbing it or glossing over it or pretending it doesn't exist. I am willing to sit with this part of myself that has been unseen, unheard, unwelcomed, and unloved for however long. And I'm willing to allow it to move through me. I'm willing to allow myself to feel it, to be with it, to experience it just through the presence of witnessing. And then we begin to see, like, oh my God, how much power and light and authority and magic is held up and bound up by my shadow aspects. And they're not hanging on to it because they're greedy. They're simply hanging on to it because they need me to receive them in order for them to give this back to me. The light and the energy that is currently bound up by your shadow will be returned to you as soon as you welcome the shadow aspect home, when you surrender to your shadow. That is the only way it will ever be transformed. Anybody who works out knows this. You want a bigger chest, you lift heavier weight. Resistance only does one thing. It makes things bigger. That's it. And sometimes we want it bigger, right? So we choose the resistant path, usually unconsciously. I think in many ways, surrender is asking your higher self, your soul, to share its plans, to share its agenda and its goals, as opposed to the small self, the limited self. I mean, if I had the choice between a plan that was created by an infinite being who knew no limitations and no bounds, or the choice of a plan that was created from a being who only knows scarcity, suffering, fear, trauma, anxiety, limitation, and lack, which plan do I think I want? I don't know. Yeah, you do. It's just that the mind often prevents us from choosing the plan of the soul because it requires what? Surrender. And for all of the control freaks out here, hi, my name's Amar. I'm a recovering control freak. I'm going to offer you a dose of some hot, strong truth. You never had control. You only had anxiety about the things you wanted to control. Control does not exist. There are things that tell us that we're in control, right? And we love these things because they make us feel important. They make us feel strong and powerful. Airplane could fall out of the sky today. A bus could lose its brakes and come careening through the front window of my home like that. You have no control. And so then the mind says, but if I don't have control, then how am I safe? You're safe when you allow yourself to be centered in the truth of who and what you are. When you listen to the deepest parts of yourself, even if you are in mortal danger, there is guidance and insight available to you that helps you circumnavigate that. It's the voice that says, hey, I don't think you should go into work today. Hey, why don't you stop for gas before you get on the freeway? Hey, why don't you get up from your desk and walk across the street? That's safety. It comes from within. When you are connected and you take your cues from this, your path takes you through the steps required to ensure your well-being. So surrender to the mind, it doesn't make sense that giving in would keep me safe. It's one of those beautiful paradoxes of the human experience. And in order to transcend something, in order to move beyond it, I have to first acknowledge it as it is. I've shared this story a lot, but I had, earlier on in my life, I had a house cleaning business. As a super Virgo like me, it was fucking paradise. I loved taking a break from cleaning up my own messes and cleaning up other people's stuff. It was heaven. And every single time, 100% of the time that I had a new client, because the thing is, a new client, I would show up, they would be there, they'd walk me through, okay, this is where the cleaning supplies are, this is what I want you to do, this is where I'll hide the key next week or whatever. Without fail, every single time, oh my God, I'm so sorry. My house is really dirty. Yeah, duh, that's why you called me. I'm not embarrassed by your mess. Your mess is job security. And guess what? The only way it's ever going to get cleaned up is by acknowledging as it is now. You cannot transcend the mess until you acknowledge its existence. The door will not present itself until you acknowledge that there must be another door. When you're stuck, okay, there's got to be another way. That's when the other way presents itself. But if you sit there and dig in your heels, no, I know what's best. It's my way or the highway. No, it's not. Letting go is the first step to receiving the guidance you require to move through, to move beyond, to move away from. Yeah, you're right, Lisa. The feminine, the surrender is absolutely the realm of the feminine. And what's interesting when we look at the dynamics between feminine and masculine energy and how everything is feminine first, and the only way the masculine is ever going to achieve what it is here to achieve is by surrendering to the feminine impulse. And how many humans out there are completely cut off from their feminine self? And this is not only men who cut themselves off from their feminine. So that's what we see. If I don't even know that there is an intuitive, emotional, energetic part of myself, then I'm just a hammer looking for a nail. I'm just a blunt object. So surrender says, if you give up your illusion of control, I will show you a better way. But what's that quote? Those who don't believe in magic will never see it. Believing is seeing. And, this is coming from someone who had many, 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 many get out of jail free cards because I just refused to accept that there was another way. And it was all my ego, right? I constructed this really, really carefully curated and calculated identity. And there was no room for uncertainty or for being wrong within that identity. This identity was a know-it-all. This identity was always right and put a huge amount of value on correctness and rightness. Of course, never stopped to question where those ideas of correctness and rightness came from, but that's another conversation. And the only thing that happened through my resistance is I just kept putting myself back at square one. I cannot tell you how many times I started over and over and over and over before I finally said, wait a minute. And before Spirit finally literally said to me, like, dude, this is it. You get one more shot. Because you have work to do in this life. And if you're not going to do it, that's fine. It'll go to somebody else. But the life that you came here to live is one of service. And if you're not going to surrender to the promise that you already made, then we need to get you out of here and get you recycled into a new life. It was very clear to me that my time was up. And it wasn't a punishment. It wasn't because I was bad. It was because I had chosen time and time again to deny myself. And from my perspective, that's ultimately what surrender is. is acknowledging who and what you really are. Because when I surrender to the truth that I am God in a body, that changes everything. No more victimhood, no more blame, no more offloading my authority. Absolutely and unequivocally 100% accountability and responsibility for my state of being at all times. It's a lot. It's a full plate. But the beautiful thing is it's a full plate of everything that I want to eat because I chose it on purpose. Surrender means that less and less and less I have the experience of, how did I get here? Who made the choice for me to be here? I was asleep when these decisions were being made, right? It also allows you to relieve yourself of having to know. Do you know how exhausting and debilitating it is to try to understand, intellectualize, and figure everything out? Try to compartmentalize and label every single experience? I don't need to know why. When the why is important, I'll be given that too. One of the notes from the higher self, my book available on Amazon. But it's true. When I need to know why, I will also be given that information. But 90% of the time, the why is irrelevant. The why is just the mind grasping for an excuse. To me, surrender is this. It is arms wide open, ready to receive whatever it is, or ready to release whatever it is. To me, this is control. This is the opposite of surrender. This is tight. This is restricted. I've shared this with you before. I cannot receive with clenched fists. This is control. This is surrender. And again, it takes me back to that benevolent piece. When I truly believe in a benevolent universe, reality, God, source, or at least a neutral one, that changes how I navigate through the world. If you really knew that no matter what, at every step and every turn, you were going to be supported and taken care of, and you are, how would that change your choices? How would that change your walking around vibe? It's an interesting thing I've been tapping to personally lately is this just sort of this existential anxiety. And I've tapped into it recently the past couple of days where I'll be doing nothing, just like washing the dishes. And all of a sudden there'll be this anxious, like, and I tap it. I'm like, what is it? Tell me about you. What's going on? And I just investigate. It's just this sense of like, there's something to be afraid of. There's something that I need to be worried about. There's something that I have to be concerned with. So it's just this PTSD from just being a human. It's not easy walking around in these bodies. It's really hard sometimes. It's a lot of work sometimes. This thing feels like 300 pounds of wet cement sometimes, especially the more and more that I tap into my innate sense of self as just a being of energy and light, to then switch back to this density and go, God, why are these things so heavy? But surrendering. I'm not here because I'm being punished. I'm not here because I did it wrong. I surrender to the truth that I am always supported. Surrender also instantly points me back towards my center. Surrender is the rescue mission coming to reorient us back to the path when we've lost our way. Yes, I love that, Teresa. Surrendering to the universe's timeline, not my own. And the irony there is this universe's timeline is so often so much more efficient. But we think, no, if I'm doing this and I'm going there, then I have to do that. And we say, okay, I'm surrendering spirit, self, higher self. Tell me, what is my focus today? What should I do? How can I manifest? It says, go sit in the park, have some ice cream and look at the clouds. And the mind says, that's stupid. That's not work. You're not working hard enough. You're not creating. Well, how do you know? You have no idea what would have awaited you in that park, the conversation you may have overheard, the person you may have encountered, the stranger that may have crossed your path that would have had the piece that you are missing. But you say to yourself, no, I have to be busy. I have to be work and productive, and I have to be a good human American, blah, 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 blah. Says fucking who? Aren't you tired of listening to this little like worrywart drama queen slave driver fear porn addict? Like, dude, I get it. It's been hard for you, but come down here with me and let's work on this together. We're either moving towards our truth or away from it. And the most surefire way to tell which is by how you feel. When spirit says to you, your job is to go sit in the park and eat ice cream, what happens internally is this opening, this expanding, this blossoming, this lightening of energy. It starts to raise and the vibration becomes higher and more expanded, less dense. So it's easier for things to come and go. And then what do we say? No, it's got to be heavy. It's got to be hard. I got to work. And now gone right back down into the densest possible version of reality where I have to work 40 hours a week to get some money and then I get it. Oh my God, aren't we tired of that? Surrender says, I trust this more than I trust this. This is telling me that I have to do it this way, the way it's been done for the past 400 years. And has that worked for anybody? No. This way says, it can actually happen like that. And if you would just trust me, I would align you with the things you're looking for. If you would just allow me, I would hook you up with the things you think you're missing or don't have access to, but you're so convinced that your way is the right way, you want to go around the loop 47 times before you make any progress. Because there's another thing that happens. When we surrender to inspiration, that inspiration that says, hey, go sit in the park and eat ice cream. And for a moment, you feel like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. When you allow yourself to follow the inspiration and your action is inspired, guess what else you get along with the inspiration? The energy with which to complete that segment of what it is that you are creating. You get it all. You get the instruction, you get the idea, you get the information, you get the steps and the energy to do it. It's like you're given this packet. But when you force it, when you say no to inspiration and you double down on your insistence that your way is the right way, guess what? Now you're efforting. Now you're draining your own battery. Now you're depleting yourself. Now you're saying no to divine help and support and inspiration. So surrender is, and yes, your relationship with it will grow and evolve. It's relative. But in the moment, it's an either or thing. You're either surrendering to it or not. It's like pregnancy. You either are or you're not. Are you pregnant? Kinda. Are you surrendered? Yeah, a little bit. No, babe. Trust me, I'm telling you this because I cannot tell you how many times I have made conditional surrender deals with Spirit thinking that I was clever and got away with it. And she just sits back and smiles and says, okay, I'll give you a few days before you realize that you're just full of shit. I love you, but you're full of shit. You just allow it. If you need to, sit on your hands. If you have to, take 100 deep breaths before you respond or act, whatever it takes. But surrender is the gap between impulse and action. And that is where the power lies, is in the gap. Before I decide what to do about what is currently present in this moment, I get to explore and expand my authority because it lies before the choice. Because really, there's only choice and outcome. And isn't that the beauty of it? If we lived in a punitive reality, we would not be given time and time and time and time again. How many do-overs have each of us individually and collectively gotten throughout our lives? That's why spirit wants us to succeed. Life wants to be lived. Yes. Trusting that I can let go of what no longer works, Teresa says, and something better will come in. And trusting that maybe I'm only 51% sure this is the best choice. Maybe the other 49% of me is all over the place. And I say, this is the best choice that I feel I have access to now. That is honest. That is true. That's not me pretending. And let's say I go left when I should have gone right. Hey, the universe is self-correcting. Do you really think the force that keeps the universes and the galaxies turning and spinning and orbiting cannot handle you making a wrong turn? So if I go left when I should have gone right, correcting, recalculating, life will get you back on track. You little control freaks, you don't have it. Doesn't exist. This is why, as an aside, I highly, highly, highly recommend things like gardening, baking, painting, or any sort of art, even being a babysitter. The reason that I recommend all these things is it is important for you to engage with something that will not be controlled. Do you think a toddler is just going to say yes to everything that you want? Good luck. I can tell you how many failed bakes have I had? How many plants have I killed? How many hideously disgusting pieces of art have I created just because I had the intent? I was figuring it out, right? You just express, you just create, you learn how to dance with the universe. That's why these things are so important because they require you to surrender. And my experience has shown me that 99% of the time, when I think things are going bad and I just sort of take my hands off and let spirit, it corrects itself. It shows me how to get it back on track. Usually, the things that are the flaming hot disaster messes are the things that I have driven into the ground. So, really, I think it's just about exhaling and saying, okay, my way didn't work. I don't know how to get out of here. I don't know why this happened. I have no idea. And I'm here. I don't know, and I'm still present and available to receive the insight I require. I want nothing more than to freak out and run away from here like my hair is on fire, and I'm staying put. I'm not letting my discomfort force me into the same old pattern. I am surrendering to what is. So surrender could be another word for acknowledgement, or acknowledgement is another word for surrender. You just acknowledge what's here. Okay, all right. Again, the housekeeping thing. All right, this is the living room. Here's the mess, the bathrooms, the bedrooms. I just go through the house and I look, all right, this is what's before me. This is where I am. This is where my choices have led me. All right, here I am. And now what? And if it's a mess that is far, I just say, Spirit, I know you brought me here to help facilitate the cleaning up of this mess, but I can't do it on my own. I need help. I need insight and guidance. So I'm just going to stay put until that arrives. Surrender is an invitation for collaboration. It's an invitation for co-creation. And anybody who's ever collaborated with anybody else, professionally, artistically, creatively, you know that it's about each collaborator bringing the best that they have to the table, seeing what the other collaborator has brought and figuring out what they can create together. It's not about, no, only my ideas are getting through. My stuff is the best. Your stuff sucks. You're only here in name and everything else. No, collaboration is a cooperative effort. It requires me to listen. It requires me to let things go and understand that it's not only going to be what I want. And collaboration at its purest and its finest creates something better than each individual could create on their own. This is the other thing. Spirit can't create without you. You are the vehicle that Spirit has chosen to create through. So all you're doing is surrendering to what you already are. The only thing that ever happens when you surrender is you meet more of what you really are. Surrender never moves you further away from your center. Surrender always returns you to the moment. And that's the only place that our authority, our connection, and our support ever exists. So what I'd like to do, we still have some time, and you all have been so beautifully active in the chat. But what I'd like to do is open it up. If there's anything that anyone wants to offer, you can just raise your hand. Anything that you want to ask or share. We do have some time before we shift into our guided energy work. Yeah, I love Lisa's sharing a lot of great stuff. So if you haven't been looking at the comments in the chat, be sure to check that out. Is anybody completely in the weeds or overwhelmed by this idea? Is anyone finding themselves triggered to panic and control by this conversation? Yes, surely it is a familiar space. Yeah, Lisa.
Hi, I really appreciate everything that you're sharing, and thank you for this invitation today. I've lived my life in the way that you're describing for many years, and I had like a change 14 years ago that was really complicated with a number of serious illnesses and operations and whatever, and I've been coming back from that. And I was just in 2019 just starting to come back from, you know, very complex trauma, childhood trauma, adult trauma, whatever. And I had lived my life in the way that you're describing, letting go and creating and stepping into social work, expressive therapy, creating art, music, and writing, collaborating for decades since the age of, well, actually, since a teenager. And then things really changed in 2019. In 2009, very complicated stuff. And I was just coming back, like just seeing the horizon and of coming back from all these different levels of trauma. And then COVID happened, father died, best friend died, stepmother died, the war in Ukraine and Russia happened. My recent ancestors come from that area. So it was just like more trauma. And so I I think my physiology has been so traumatized by all these things that it's like I've been trying to get to back to the place that you're describing, and I can, like in meditations at times. And I had a recent health issue that's made me realize I'm really not letting go in the way that I really need to, because there's some physical things, a particular physical thing happened that's actually could get acute again because I having trouble letting go. So I really appreciate you bringing this up in the way that you are. I know intellectually about letting go because I've lived my life that way. I just turned 70 last Friday, and so I have lived my life in the way that you have described in terms of stepping into letting go, living from a place of creativity, embracing the feminine mother principle. That's been my life until what happened 14 years ago. And even in the midst of, tough stuff, I was still able to record music, which I'm back. I finally like was able to record a song last year, the end of last year, and I mean, I astounded myself by stepping into the recording studio, and like this really strong voice came through. I wasn't really sure where it came from because I wasn't feeling strong at the moment. And so it just was a reminder that even when we're really struggling, if we just let go for even like a couple of hours in a recording studio, or I don't know, walking down in the park, or seeing whatever circumstance it is, like we can kind of surprise ourselves when something else comes through. If we can just, for a moment or a few hours or in a meditation, just release,
Yeah. And
you
I
know? And
appreciate your voice, Lisa. And I'm thankful for your presence and you sharing all of that you've shared. And there's a couple things that come up as you're sharing that I want to offer. Um, and you've touched on so many of them. I think oftentimes what surrender can teach us is that it's not always about right and wrong. Sometimes it's just about that there's value.
hmm,
We often we try to understand, why am I here, spirit? Like, what's the message? What's the meaning? What's the purpose? And I understand that. And I think part of it comes from the desire to do good work or be good spiritual people or honor our journey or whatever. But I also find that oftentimes it's actually an intellectual idea that, oh, if I surrender, then I get to move on. If I surrender, then it's over. If I surrender, then it's fixed or I'm healed. No. Surrender doesn't mean it's going to be easier. Surrender doesn't mean that there is no more struggle or suffering ever. Surrender means I allow myself to be where I am, free from resistance. I'm no longer in a cage match with spirit. And I just say, okay, this is where I am. Sometimes letting go doesn't mean moving on. This is what I really hope you understand. Letting go does not equate moving on. And again, I speak from the experience of, okay, fine, I'll surrender. And it was coming from a place of transaction. Well, if I give you this spirit, then what do I get? I'm not surrendering without something in it for me. What's in it for you is you. What's in it for me? You come closer to yourself. You know yourself in a way that you have not previously known yourself. Suffering becomes valuable. And again, we don't look for suffering and struggle, but we understand that the only thing suffering is a portal to a deeper understanding of who we really are. Suffering brings us to the place where we're finally willing to say, okay, I give up. I give in. I don't know how to get out of this. So I understand the desire to want to move on, right? Move out of spaces, especially when it's traumatic or it's painful or it's hard or it's lonely. God, of course we want to get out of that as fast as possible. But ironically, sometimes the way to make it move faster is to stop trying to move it. Sometimes it's just saying, surrender means I need more time to heal. Sometimes surrender is I'm not ready. And that's okay too, because I think we've been sold this idea of constant progression as a sign of success. You can't not progress. right? It's that, is it Plato or Aristotle? But you go to the same river every single day, the same spot and the same river at the same time every single day, and it will never be the same river twice. So you can't not evolve. You can't not change. You can't not grow. And if you want it to be something that happens according to the timeline of your soul, you simply allow. Yeah, Lisa.
Um, I just wanted to say that for me personally, and thank you for everything you just said, for me, an essential ingredient about my healing journey, and this has been since the age of 7, is being a compassionate witness to myself. I turned to myself at the age of 77, excuse me, at 72, but that was a Freudian slip, so to speak. I turned to myself at the age of 7 and I said, I know this is really hard, but like, I'm with you, okay? Spirit said, a part of me said that to myself. It's essential that we're a compassionate witness to ourselves as we go through this, because obviously our human self goes through so much. We all know that. But, and being a compassionate witness to ourselves is an essential ingredient about all of this that you're speaking about, because that's when we are able to be with ourselves and hold all the parts of ourselves, whatever experience, in compassion. And that compassionate energy is what helps us to heal as we're moving through life.
Yeah,
And
and we know this from biology that those neural pathways and those structures in the brain are programmed through warmth and receptivity. That's the fastest way to reprogram ourselves is by being compassionate and kind. And I think it's very telling when we see a lack of outward compassion expressed through another. The only thing it's telling us is how depleted of compassion their inner world is. The voice of criticism that you hear coming out of the mouth about another is the same voice that they use on themselves. So the next time you hear a voice and you're like, oh my God, this person is a monster, let that be your signal for compassion. Because if you think it's hard listening to them, imagine being them. There's one more thing that I want to touch on here, and then we'll take a quick break and move into the energy work. The difference between ease and easy. Surrender is not easy, but it invites ease. My guides have told me from day one, if you came here expecting easy, convenient, and comfortable, get comfortable, because it's not a promise. Nowhere in any document, anywhere, in any level of experience or existence, in any timeline or version of reality, has it ever been written that we are entitled to it being easy, convenient, and comfortable. No, no. So ease, I just don't have to fight it. I'm just not going to use my own life force energy to resist it. I'm just not going to force it. Now, will the things I am asked to do in service of my own liberation be easy? Well, it depends on what I've lived through. But ease is always available. Easy is a bonus. Easy is, oh, that's a nice unexpected treat. Cool. Enjoy it while it's there. I love that, Marcy. There should be no shame in crying. You know, crying is often a way that we just use to reset our parasympathetic nervous system. It's not necessarily that I'm sad. I'm just crying because it's a release, right? It's a biological function of moving unwanted and unneeded things out of the body. And I don't know why I want to share this, but I will. There's this woman on Instagram, is it the holistic psychologist? I can't remember all, but I love her vibe. And she shared this the other day. If you pull down, like if you put your finger in your ear and you just pull down lightly, not painfully, but pull down, this actually helps reset your parasympathetic nervous system. This actually is connected to the vagus nerve. So when you're finding yourself out of it and you're, oh my God, panic, stress, fear, whatever, just find a little quiet spot, pull down lightly on your ear, and just breathe. There it goes, and you'll feel it start to reset. Tears are a powerful thing. And I think it's also important to acknowledge that there's very real grief in the human experience, especially during our current chapter. There's another thing that I think it's also important to acknowledge. You are not responsible for keeping tabs on all of the trauma that's happening on the planet. There is an epidemic of people who cannot reset their nervous system. And it's because our brain was not designed to know about all of the trauma and tragedy that's happening on the planet all of the time. Before we were as connected as we are, we only knew what was happening in the village or the town or the block, maybe the country. But we did not have a 24/7 constant feed available to us so that we could tune in at any time to all of the horrible things that are happening. Surrender to your body's need to reset itself. Surrender to the fact that you may have developed a little bit of addiction on doom scrolling. Surrender to the fact that your body gets used to the chemicals that it produces when it witnesses human suffering and it becomes dependent on them. Probably the healthiest thing you could do for yourself is take a few days away from this, is to cart your TV out to the curb, is to delete any news channel from your daily consumption. Even for just a few days, give your body an opportunity to remind you what it feels like when you are balanced. The body knows how to return itself to homeostasis, but we got to give it an opportunity to do so. Surrender to the truth that your body knows what it needs, but it can't override you. It can't override you denying giving it what it needs. It can only get louder. Surrender means I am not responsible for all of the horrible things that are happening on the planet right now. I can't be. And it does nobody any good for you to burden yourself with the suffering of the planet to the degree that you are diminished and sick and depressed. That's the opposite of the world we want. Yes, we are always accountable for our state of being. Can't always choose the circumstances, but I can always choose my response. All right, I want to make sure we have time to get in and do some energy work. So let's take 2 minutes. It's 2 after, so come back at 4 after. And we'll dive into our energy work. This is the time when, you can have your video off if you want. As long as you can hear the audio, that's all that matters. If you want to relocate yourself so that you can more fully relax, we can do that. But I'll be back in 2 minutes. Okay, there's 2 people I want to share with you before we drop into the energy work. The woman that I was talking about the vagus nerve activation name on Instagram, her name is Nicole LaPera. She has a book out that's supposed to be really, really fabulous. And her Instagram is the holistic psychologist. Did I spell that correctly? No, I didn't. Psychologist, not. Can I edit this? Yeah. The holistic psychologist. And there's another guy that I love on Instagram, Flynn Skidmore. And both of these people really, really are so good at talking about how to work with our inner parts, how to unravel and untangle all of these unconscious sort of, reflexive patterned behavior. I find them to be both super inspiring and super, super helpful. So if you're on Instagram, I recommend checking them out. I have found them to be super valuable. All right, what we're going to do now is we're going to dive into our energy work. So uh, so all you have to do is find a spot where you can be fully comfortable. Again, as long as you can hear the sound of my voice, that's really the only thing that matters right now for the duration of our energy work. So just settle in, make sure all my bells and whistles are on mute. Yeah, okay. And just start with your breath. Breathing in nice and full and deep. And just using that breath to begin to slow everything down. Finding yourself present in this moment. And just allow yourself to be. This is a good moment to practice the concept of surrender. So as you're breathing, just expand your senses as far out as you can. And let's start with your sense of hearing. As you're breathing and sitting, just tune into your hearing and your auditory perception. How far outside of the room can you hear? Is there noise on the street, upstairs, in the other room? Just tune into whatever sounds or noises you can hear and just acknowledge them. Okay, I hear a dog barking. Okay, I hear my brother-in-law in the kitchen making breakfast. Okay, I hear the ceiling fan. I hear my stomach growling. So just breathe in and allow yourself to perceive and just observe what you can hear. Now you can breathe and tune into another sense, your sense of touch. And I can feel the slippers on my feet and the floor beneath them. I can feel the tightness of my jeans around my knee. I can feel the pressure of the chair and my body against the chair. I can feel a little bit of breeze as the ceiling fan is moving the air. I can feel the heat coming in from the windows that are right across from me as the sun is shining through them. Now, as you're breathing, just bring your attention back to the moment and dive in a little bit more deeply. And now just surrender to being present in your body. Just observe as your chest rises and falls as you breathe. Feel yourself present and at home in this moment. And with each exhale, just feel yourself moving more deeply into yourself. Feel yourself fully present in the body, fully present in this moment. As you deepen your connection to the moment, finding yourself present in your inner landscape, breathing in nice and deep as the visual of your inner temple begins to reveal itself. This is your place of connection. This is your home base. This is your center point. Find yourself in that seat of sovereign authority. As you breathe and expand into that space, start to become aware of your helpers, all your layers of self, your guides, your co-creators, your partners in spirit. They are in this space with you. They're in this space within you. And with each breath, just imagine that any tension or restriction or resistance is just melting out of your body. We're going to ask your body, your physical self, to begin to give you a few clues to what surrender feels like. The language of the body is very different than the language of the mind. It's not necessarily something you may be able to hear right away. It's a subtler frequency, it's a quieter voice, but nonetheless, just asking the body to support you in receiving the experience of surrender right now. Just breathe and allow yourself to do this, to receive this experience. Also giving permission to your mind and your nervous system to surrender. To just exhale. Inviting all layers of self to relax and open, to surrender and receive. There we go. Just feel yourself present as your body continues to relax and remind you of the sensations of surrender. Beautiful. And just breathe. And as you continue to practice surrender, something begins to happen, and your inner experience becomes more prominent than the outer one. And you begin to remember how to maintain a connection and a focus on your inner experience, regardless of what's happening externally. The idea of mastery of self has been likened to simply becoming non reactive. That when I am in my mastery, no matter what, I am not moved by my external circumstances. I am not deceived by the illusions of the mind. And I allow myself to be fully present in each and every moment, understanding that it is always within my authority to choose how I respond or reply. Just allow yourself to connect more deeply to the surrendered state. And we're going to ask for a part of self or a messenger from spirit to arise from within and direct you to a place, a thought, an experience, a topic of focus that right now could use you surrendering to it. And if it helps you to connect, you can place your hand on your heart and we can simply ask internally, Spirit and Self, please direct my loving awareness to that which would most benefit from my willing surrender at this moment. And simply breathe and allow. Maybe you see, maybe you feel, or maybe you hear a response. Maybe you don't receive any feedback right this very minute. Just trust it'll come. And just breathe. Now, as you breathe, just feel yourself connecting with that energy, whatever it was that you received in response to that question, that what needs your surrender? What is asking for your surrender? Just feel yourself merging with that. To live the questions, to allow yourself to be guided through your experience to the truth that is here for you. One of my favorite prompts for surrender, especially if we're working with inner parts or through experiences that feel particularly challenging or activating or difficult, simply place your hand over your heart. Breathe in and say to yourself, I allow, I allow, I allow. Now as I am, with all that I am, I allow. And so it is. And then just come back to your breath. Breathing in nice and deep as you come back to the moment. Breathing in nice and deep as you come fully back into the room. Offering deep bows of gratitude to the energies and information that came in to support us today. Breathing in nice and deep as you're back in the room, back in the body, and back in this moment in time. Whenever you're ready, you can come back. Oh, give a big stretch. And return when you are ready. So, a couple of things I want to offer. And as you're coming back and take your time, you don't have to turn on your camera if you're, I don't know, maybe you're asleep. Who knows? Maybe you passed out during that. But what you had shared, Nicole, right as we were diving in about realizing that it's grief that's working its way through your body, that is so huge. And I think oftentimes, especially, there's a tipping point that occurs. And as we become wiser and more integrated and more embodied, we see that what we have been reaching out to receive from spirit and our guides and our helpers and our angels is now what we should be giving to ourselves. It's a fractal experience. We receive the love of spirit so that we know what that feels like and is, so that we can then apply it to ourselves. We go to the top of the mountain and we have the other worldly, mind-blowing, out-of-body experience, and then we get kicked back down into our body. But now what we have is a frequency embedded within us that changes who we are. It changes what we know. It gives us access and insight into frequencies, abilities, and energies that perhaps we've even forgotten about. So here's how I approach cleaning up any mess. That's what I call doing my inner work, or if I'm working with someone else, or when I was cleaning house. It's my favorite affirmation. Everything is welcome, but only love can stay. So what that does is it tells any layer of self, every layer of self, any being or energy, frequency, or whatever it is, hey, y'all can come to the party, but if you want to stick around, you have to be a source of love. You have to be inspired and moved by love. So I just offer that as a way to kind of get your head on straight before you go in there, right? It's not about going in there, house on fire, getting ready to break down the door and, no, just let yourself be kind, compassionate, and gracious. Move in with love and compassion, because that is what is going to open your responsive centers. When we go in aggressive and angry, everything goes into defense mode. So give yourself what you should have been given, which is unconditional love and infinite compassion. Yes, Teresa. Teresa saying, I saw a tight flower bud and it cannot bloom if it doesn't allow its petals to release and open. Same thing, like those trees out there that are all bare now. All those dead leaves have fallen off. If they didn't let them all go, where will the new leaves go? And sometimes surrender is saying, I don't know what to do, but I'm here until I figure it out, or I'm here until I receive the insight and the guidance. This is something I want to share with you, is that when we remember we are in a co-creative relationship with spirit, it's a game of catch. And when I have a request or I'm sending something out, I'm throwing the ball and then I'm waiting for it to come back. What's my insight? What's my feedback? Has it happened? What has occurred? Whatever. And sometimes we hold ourselves hostage. Oh, I didn't do it right. Oh, it wasn't clear enough. Just let yourself be. Allow yourself to receive. Allow it to come back to you. Allow things to reorient themselves in your favor. One of the lessons that's in Notes from the Higher Self that I remembered when we were in that was, and I can't remember which note it is, but the message is, nothing is my adversary. Everything is from me and everything is for me. And that's how I move through the world, assuming that everything that I experience is here to support me in some way, because it came from me. And I trust myself. And I think ultimately that's a lot of what surrender comes down to, is just trust and faith. And sometimes that's hard. So surrender. Just exhale. Go from this to this. This feels a lot better than this. Yeah. So as always, this replay will live on my YouTube channel. Again, if you find yourself feeling like you want to offer donation, those are my links to my Stripe and my PayPal. Also, the Self-Liberators League is launching on Wednesday. You can go to my website, amar.energy, and read about it on the events page. There's also the link to my book. That's launching on Wednesday, open for registration starting then. I'm going to be sharing a lot about it in my newsletter over the next couple of days. I'm super excited about this. Thank you so much for showing up. I so appreciate you. So much love for all of you. Have a fabulous week. Happy Valentine's Day. I love you. Mwah. I'll see you next Sunday. Bye, everybody.